What's up, guys? I recently installed a power steering kit on my 66 Mustang from Maier. Now, when I installed that, the weather was really bad and I did not get a chance to get out and drive the car, but I got a break in the weather, so I want to get out and see the differences between what the manual steering was and what the power steering is now. So let's fire up the car and get it out there. It's really cold right now, so the car's going to struggle, but let's get her warmed up so we can get out on the road. Whew, it's cold in here. So far so good. Getting out on the highway, everything works just fine as you'd expect with the power steering. It's something I'm getting used to with not having to fight the wheel, and that's I have a Toyota Tundra that I drive every day, and so I'm used to power steering. But with this car, when you get in it, you're just kind of you know that things are going to be more manual, and with this power steering, it's nice to not have to fight the wheel. And that's one of the reasons why I did this, is as I continue to upgrade this car, every little change and nuance that I do to this thing, every little upgrade will be something that I want to be able to feel and notice the change. For example, when I put those torque boxes in the car, because that's stiffening the chassis by itself, most people won't notice that upgrade, that change. But if you start adding it up with all the other parts that I put, I've got those subprime connectors, and I've got the export brace and the Monte Carlo bar. As I start to upgrade that stuff and stiffen the chassis, overall the package becomes a stiffer car. And when you're fighting the steering wheel, you're focused on that, and your energy goes towards that, and you're not listening and feeling the car. And that's one of the good reasons why I wanted to do a power steering kit. So one of the things that I'm also noticing is the position of the steering wheel. Now, for those that watch the install video, I had to move my steering column in towards the cab because of the length of the steering column and the universal joint that I put on there, and it was something that most people wouldn't have to deal with if they put this kit on their car, because they would just cut their steering column to the right length. But I have a different setup, so I had to modify what I had, and by moving the steering in, the steering wheel is it's about an inch closer. I measured, it was about 3 inches from the back of the steering wheel to the dash pad, and now it's about 4 inches. So I got an inch closer, but not only is it an inch closer to me, which is fine in terms of holding this way, it's actually taller, subtly, because it's on a slope, right? So as you come in, you're actually going up. And so, when you put your hand on top of the wheel, which I know we're not supposed to be driving up here, but when you put your hand up here, it actually feels, I'm going to exaggerate it, but it feels like I'm driving up here. And it feels weird. Now, that's something I'll get used to over time. But right now, as I'm driving the car, it just feels weird to have the steering wheel be taller or higher than I'm used to. Now, as I go around these corners, it's effortless. Now, at this speed and in these subtle corners, it's not that big a deal. It's not really much difference. It's going to be on those tighter corners, and then as you're turning around in parking lots, all that kind of stuff. And then as I continue to push the car for more of the spirited driving, and eventually I like to get the car on the track, and that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but I want to be able to feel the car and the changes that are happening and not have to worry about focusing on fighting the steering wheel. Spirited driving, right? All right, let's turn the car around here and see how effortless this is. I got somebody in my way here, towing a car right in the middle of the road. Okay, let's turn this around and just see how effortless this is. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's not a really big test, but it's just so simple. I don't have to fight it, right? Okay, that has nothing to do with the power steering, but this sure is fun. And this road is pretty bumpy, and as I'm darting and missing the potholes, it's easy to just to move the steering wheel and just fight. Again, I'm not fighting anything, and at the higher speeds, it's less work, you know, because the steering, you know, it's easier to turn, but you know, this is something that it's just the sum of the parts, right? As we continue to upgrade this car, making this a power steering setup is something that's just going to be nicer for driving. And then as I continue to build the car up and push a little harder, I'll be able to spend less time thinking about fighting the steering wheel and more time thinking about the car and what I'm trying to do with the car and that kind of stuff. Let's head back to the house and wrap this up. You know, it's always tough to do these reviews when you're driving the car because I'm focused on driving and trying to enjoy driving, but also talk about the things that I need to say in these videos. So I figure let's just finish this up here in the garage and we can talk about the stuff that's important. So why would you buy this steering box, this steering setup over a different brand, or putting just a stock system in here, or upgrading the stock system to something else, or upgrading the stock to this, or even electric power steering? We can get into all that. The biggest reason is that Mike Maier has been doing this, he's been building this kit and putting it together for the last 20 years or so. And he worked with different manufacturers on steering pumps and steering boxes, and he found that with this KRC kit, this is the best one that he has been able to find that checks all the boxes, right? It's serviceable. You can buy parts if you ever have to service this. It's got the right ratios inside there and inside the pump for the speeds and the volumes that he's looking for. You can buy different pulley sizes, again, to change the speed of your pump. It's got the steering box is a 14:1 ratio, which is another thing that gives you faster steering, which is something that we're looking for. We don't want something that's sluggish and slow, much like the stock box or even a Borgeson box. A Borgeson box is a little bit slower than this one that we've got on here. So I keep saying Borgeson style in the previous video because everybody's familiar with that name and it's very similar to that, but this is not a Borgeson box. So these are some of the reasons why you want to buy this kit, is because it's the perfect one that Mike has found over the last several decades of what he's been trying to do with his cars and the racing that he does. And so why wouldn't you do electric power steering? This is something actually I was looking to do power steering, electric power steering back when I bought this car. It was something I was interested in, but it was something I never thought about was the steering box. Most people just use the stock steering box that's in your car to put that electric power assist steering system on your steering shaft, and you use your stock ratio. And you're still stuck with a slower, handling, power steering setup. It's power steering, which is what we're looking for, but it's not quick and nimble, and that's what I'm looking for with this car. So for those that are looking at doing that, you can still do that, but this kit addresses those issues where I get a faster steering and I get power steering at the same time. So this is why I went with this kit and not something like an e-pass or electric power assisted steering. So I did get to talk to Mike Maier about some concerns I had. One of them being temperature, another one being air in the lines. And he said that for the temperature part, what he found over the last couple of decades is that on average, in most scenarios, but there's always gonna be the stuff that stands out, but if you add a larger reservoir to where you have more volume of fluid, he has found that has done more than adding a cooler for most scenarios. Not that you can't do both, but he says if I'm finding where I'm having a heating issue with my fluid, I can add a larger reservoir, it'll spread that temperature over a larger amount of fluid, and I may not need to add a cooling system on here. It's cold right now when I'm doing this, so I'll have to wait till the summer to see how that plays out, so I don't have to worry about it right now. But that's something that I can look at down the road if I am finding that the fluid is getting too warm. Mike did mention one thing that can increase the temperatures underneath the hood is if you've got too much advanced timing, something around the low to mid 30s for total timing, where the combustion is, some of it's completing inside the header, and that adds extra heat to the headers and therefore in the engine bay. When you're driving around, it's not as much of an issue because you've got airflow through here, but if you're sitting at a stoplight or in a parking lot or even on an autocross track or a road course, that extra heat can affect the line and heat that line up. So for some people that maybe want to reduce their total timing, that might help with under hood temperatures, but it's just a side issue in terms of the heat that can be generated. But as something he did point out, I got to double check again. I think I'm sitting at 30 or 32 total timing. I got it written down somewhere. I should look it up so that I can find out where I'm at. But he says that I shouldn't have an issue with that, but that's something to be mindful of. And the other being air in the lines. Now, the way I routed these lines are very similar to how they're set in the instructions, but it does say to keep them as low as possible, keep them below the reservoir if you can help it. And again, I asked Mike about that, and he said that over the last couple of decades, they have found that's just not necessarily the case. The way I have those lines routed along that shock tower, they do go up from the steering box and then down to the reservoir here on the steering pump, but he says you're not likely to have a problem with air in those lines. And so I don't need to worry about trying to get some custom lines to route the lines like down below the headers and come up to the steering box. He says you should be okay. That's just one of those things that is one of those people have talked about for years that don't do this or do this. And he says for what they're finding for these kits, you're not having a problem with air in the lines with this setup. And the last thing I did want to mention, more so about the Mike Maier buying stuff, he is a smaller shop. They make all the parts themselves. And they make things in batches and kits. So if you were to order something, it may take longer for one person than the next person, depending on when you order. And not everybody's willing to wait for that kind of delivery time or shipping time. I don't mind it because these are the parts that I want. Mike isn't just a guy that just thought of something and he's trying to sell a part. He's been doing this for decades, and so he's perfected his system, perfected his parts. And they've got more parts that he was telling me about that they don't have on their website yet that they're perfecting right now, which is kind of cool. That he's been doing this for years and he's got the background for it. He does a lot of autocross racing, so a lot of this stuff is geared towards that, getting the car on the track, which is something I'd like to do. I want to buy parts like that, and I want to buy good parts that are built well by a guy that has figured out that, okay, this piece doesn't work this way or this shape needs to be cut down. That's why I buy his parts. So I'm willing to wait for parts like that. Some people just want to buy stuff off the shelf and put it on their car and go, and that's fine. There's places that sell that kind of stuff, but for me, I'm okay with waiting for parts from Mike because that's what it's going to take. So if you guys are looking to buy something from him and hope it'll ship tomorrow, just a heads up, it probably won't, because again, they make stuff in batches. And so if you order something, they're not going to get to that particular thing for another month, then it may be a couple of months before you get something shipped. Or maybe you order something and they're on the very end of making a batch of stuff and you just happen to get called the right time and they're going to be shipping in a couple of weeks, and it might work out for you. So just a heads up on that. I know that some people have asked some questions about that stuff, and I think it's important to know with a small shop like what Mike has, they just can't crank stuff out and turn it around and have everything all the time on the shelf. It's just not something they're able to do. He says he would like to get to that point, but for now, this is where we're at with it. And again, I'm okay with it because I'm getting the parts that I want. I know I'm getting good parts for my car. So guys, that was a long-winded way of wrapping this up, but I'm very happy so far. I mean, I haven't had a lot of seat time, and I've been able to drive this car once. The weather hasn't been cooperating. It's so cold right now, and it's dry, so I was able to get the car out, but I don't like to drive this car in bad weather. And so I want to get some more seat time with this, but so far it's been great. There's no leaks on this thing. It's dry as a bone. That's awesome. I don't like have to fix things after the fact, and this thing, it just worked. You get in the car, fire it up, and it just worked. Big fan of that, and I can't wait to get some more seat time with this and really get a chance to explore this little bit faster steering ratio that I haven't had with this car until now, so I want to see what I can do with that. So anyways, all right guys, that's what I got. We'll see you in the next one.